Okay, sorry guys. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to talk about why boundaries matters. They prevent stress, they stop burnout, and they stop resentment in relationships. Often when we have weak boundaries or we don't have boundaries at all, like I said, people take advantage of us. And when people take advantage of us, we start to resent them. And when we start to resent people, that's when our relationships really start to struggle. We want to feel healthy emotionally and mentally. We want to learn to improve our communication. We want to also increase our self respect. A lot of clients that we see at the agency really struggle with self respect, putting ourselves above others at times. Again, we'll get into that in a little bit. We also want to encourage independence for ourselves. Sometimes we rely on people and they can't meet our needs. So we want to learn to set boundaries because that empowers us. And we'll talk today about how boundaries really do empower us. Boundaries is actually my absolute favorite conversation to talk about. It is so much fun, and I'll tell you why, because it is empowering. We'll get into that later. But that's why I love boundaries. So whoever was here for my last webinar on stress, you'll know that I like to provide definitions because I'm a master's student. I've written millions of papers and I always provide definitions. So here's a definition I found of a boundary. A boundary is a clear limit that you set to protect your emotional, physical, mental, and personal well-being in relationships, work, and daily life. It defines what is acceptable and what is not. It helps you maintain healthy interactions with others. So, we're going to try to figure out how to have those healthy relationships, how to have healthy boundaries, what a boundary is, what a boundary is not. So, this is my explanation of what a boundary is. Boundary is like a gate. So, we all know what a gate is like. It moves, it's flexible, it's permeable. It's not a wall. When we have a wall, what happens is no one can get in through the wall. They can get in through a gate, and no one can get out through the wall either. What happens when we have walls, we become really isolated. No one can connect with us, and we have too much of a guard up to try to connect with other people. That's why I love boundaries, is because we are in charge of how much we open that gate. So I want you to picture like an invisible line here right in front of me. On this side of the invisible line, everything is okay with me. I let people treat me this way. This is okay. On this side of the invisible line, this is not okay. I'm not going to let you treat me this way. And I get to decide what's okay with me and what's not okay with me. I get to decide how people are going to speak to me, how people are going to treat me. It's dependent upon what I'm okay with, what my limits are okay with. So that's a quick definition of what a boundary is. It's a gate, it's permeable. People can go through it, but we control how much people get through. So an example is I have a certain boundary with my husband, I have a certain boundary with my friends, I have a certain boundary with my counselors at the agency. Everybody has different types of I have different types of boundaries with everyone in my life. Some people I let in really close, some people I don't. It's all dependent on what I am okay with. So there's different types of boundaries that I want to talk about. There's 5 different types. The first one is relationship boundaries. And that's pretty much what we always think about when we think about boundaries. We think about, creating boundaries with friends, with family, whatever it may be. So they can be personal, they can be professional, they can be within family. So here's an example of what a relationship boundary is like. I won't tolerate being spoken to disrespectfully. It's not okay for you to speak to me that way. In my opinion, we need to have boundaries in all relationships. It doesn't matter what type of relationship it is, you need to have some type of boundary. This, again, in my opinion, is the most important type of boundary because we're going to teach people how to treat us. We don't want people taking advantage of us. We don't want people hurting us. We want to be okay. So we decide what we're comfortable with, how we're going to be treated, and what is acceptable and what we're not going to accept. If we keep allowing people to treat us in certain disrespectful ways, they're going to continue to treat us that way. If we choose not to set a boundary, people, even unconsciously, are going to continue to treat us that way. We are the only ones that can put a stop to this. So you think of a friend, a neighbor. A neighbor's maybe a difficult example, but like let's think of a friend. A friend, cancels on you often, or they poke fun of you when they're out with other friends, and they just aren't the most respectful person out there. They're going to continue to treat you that way until you decide that you're not okay with it. And you speak up and you set a boundary. Like I gave that example. I'm not okay with you speaking to me that way. I'm not okay that you keep canceling on me at the last minute. My time's really valuable, and I booked this time off work so that we could spend time together, or whatever it may be. But we become a victim of our own selves, is what happens. People treat us disrespectfully, yes, but if we notice that it's disrespectful and we don't put an end to it, that's when we actually start hurting ourselves because we know this is wrong and we're not telling people to stop. So that's the first boundary. The second boundary is like a physical boundary. So we need privacy sometimes. I'm teaching my kids, look, you need to go to the bathroom alone. You're 4 and 7. Mom needs to go to the bathroom alone. This is like my physical boundary. And my kids are like, why? And I'm like, I like to go to the bathroom alone. Thank you very much. Lock the door, right? I'm sure parents can relate to this. They pound on the door. No, this is my boundary. Physical touch. Sometimes we're comfortable with like hugs. Sometimes we don't want a hug from a coworker. That's my personal space. Not okay with that. So here's a cute example. My son is actually like, I'm really proud of him. He's 4 years old and he's trying to understand boundaries, I think, because the other day he said to my daughter, who's older, she's 7, he said, Ellie, please don't touch my body. I was like blown away. I was like super proud of that because he's learning what he's okay with and what he's not okay with. Again, we're the ones that decide that. And so maybe you're all comfortable with like a hug from a certain coworker that you've been working with for 10 years, but the new guy just 2 offices down, that's a no-go. You don't know him. You're going to set a boundary and you're going to say no. There's many people that say this, and I forget who's the one that coined it. But no is a full sentence, is what it is. We're the ones that get to decide what is okay and what is not okay. Then we have what we call emotional boundaries. It's protecting our feelings, is what it is. So, as a psychologist, I'm often in a role of rescuer. All of us psychologists, we want to rescue people, we want to help people. But unfortunately, that hurts us. And I teach my psychologists, we can't fix people, we can't rescue people. We do it collaboratively. So what I often have to say, even if I'm saying this in my mind, is to a friend, I can listen, but I can't solve this problem for you. That's an emotional boundary. I'm going to protect my energy here, and I'm going to not put all I have into fixing you. I used to do that with relationships. 100%. It gave me meaning and purpose in life to help friends and fix their problems. But I realized I was giving so much energy and it was really hurting me. So I had to create emotional boundaries within myself. We also have time boundaries. Time boundaries are how we manage our energy, our time, our priorities. No, I can't take this extra shift on the weekend. I have my sister's birthday party. Unfortunately, I cannot take it. And I know some people will say, well, my boss is making me, and if I say no, he's going to fire me. I totally get that. And maybe what you can do, and again, I've had difficult jobs too. I've been a cashier at Walmart, like I've done everything, right? Um, but maybe you have an assertive conversation with your boss and say, hey, next time I need more heads up. I had this and this booked. Can you please give me more of a heads up? I'm not okay when I don't get heads up, right? Just simple things like that. This is how I'm going to manage my time, and I need you to respect it. Just like the example I said with the friend who cancels last minute. I need you to respect my time. I showed up at the coffee shop and you weren't here. You've done that twice to me. That's not okay. I'm feeling hurt. I'm feeling whatever. This is not okay. Then we have mental boundaries. Mental boundaries, I think, are also incredibly important. They're about our thoughts, they're about our beliefs, and they're about our opinions. In today's world, more than ever, we differ with people on opinions. And I think that that is absolutely okay. However, we don't need to always tell people our opinions. We don't even need to argue with people about their opinions. It's okay to say, I respect your opinion, but I just see it differently. Because again, I'm going to set a boundary and I'm going to respect that other person's boundary. I'm not going to attack them. What we need to have is healthy differences. That's what makes the world go round. So we can set a boundary and say, I respectfully disagree, and that's okay. And we can move on. What we also need to do is when it comes to our beliefs, when it comes to our thoughts and opinions, is be very careful about people. It goes back to the relationships, but be very careful around who we're surrounding ourselves with. Maybe you're the one person in the group that believes differently than everyone else. So you're going to steer clear of certain conversations. There's certain people in my life, politics and religion, I cannot ever talk to them about politics and religion. That's a no-go. I like talking about that stuff. I actually find it quite interesting. But there's certain people in my life you can't ever talk to those people about it because they're going to start crossing my boundaries. Arguments are going to happen. And so I've just created that mental boundary in my mind that this is a no-go area. I'm going to protect my beliefs. I'm going to protect my opinions and thoughts. And I'm not going to discuss these with other people because that's going to be harmful to our relationship. That's going to hurt the other person and that's going to hurt me. I kind of want to talk about how emotions come into boundaries. This is where I find emotions my favorite thing to, or boundaries my favorite thing to talk about. When it comes to boundaries, they can be synonymous with a bunch of different words. They can be synonymous with the word assertiveness, and they can be synonymous with the word anger. Now, every time I bring up anger, people start to panic. Like, anger is such a bad thing. Like, my mom and dad were angry people. My partner is an angry person. My boss is an angry person. But in all honesty, anger is my favorite emotion, and I'll explain why. Anger is really healthy. We have different levels of anger, is what we have. We have anger, or sorry, we have frustration, we have anger, and we have rage. Frustration is like I put on a shirt tonight and then I brushed my teeth, and of course I got toothpaste on my shirt, and I was like, nope, not wearing that shirt for tonight. So I was frustrated. Like I do that all the time. I literally said to myself in my brain, like, Jen, you do this every time. Why do you put on a nice shirt and then brush your teeth, right? Just frustrated with myself. And that's okay. Anger is about, I always picture it this way. I'm going to stand my ground. I'm going to set a boundary and I'm going to say, this is not okay. You can't speak to me that way. You can't treat me that way. I am angry when you speak to me that way. Anger does not involve yelling. It does not involve swearing. It does not involve disrespect, being disrespectful. That is rage. Rage is a whole different thing than anger. It is incredibly important to differentiate between anger and rage. So, rage is about destroying. And I believe all emotion can be what we call adaptive. It has a purpose, it's productive, it shifts things, it moves things. And I'll tell you how rage can be adaptive because I don't want anyone to ever have bad thoughts about emotions. I'll put it that way. But rage is adaptive if someone touches my kids. You touch my kids, you harm my kids, I'm going to rage on you. I'm going to go to jail myself. I'm going to get in trouble. Rage has big consequences. But there's a reason for my rage. Rage is not helpful in many situations. But that kind of situation where we have that big rageful instinct to protect, that's when rage is okay. But anger is completely different. Anger is about empowering ourselves. We feel stronger with anger. Often with rage, we feel a bit dysregulated, is what we feel. And so with anger, We want to stand up for ourselves, is what we want to do. Again, imagine the imaginary line here. When you speak to me on this side of the imaginary line, I'm not angry. I'm okay. I'm happy. When you speak to me and it's more on this side of the imaginary line, I'm angry with how you speak to me that way. Anger can be calm as well. I can speak to someone and say, actually, I'm angry when you speak to me that way. I'm angry when you behave that way. For some reason, our world has become really afraid of the word anger. I think we have really misconstrued what anger and rage is. And I'm really sad about that, to be honest, because anger can be so healthy. We need healthy anger in order to protect ourselves. Anger is protective, anger is empowering. And so when you feel like your boundary is being violated, whatever type of boundary it is, you should feel some kind of anger. There should be something stirring in you, is what happens with a boundary violation. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to self-reflect now when we talk about beliefs about boundaries. This was kind of like the question I posed at the beginning of the webinar tonight. Why are you here? What do you want to learn about boundaries? What do you want to unlearn about boundaries? Because from since we were little kids, we were taught about anger and boundaries. We were taught things that are maybe really helpful about anger and boundaries, and we were taught things that are really unhelpful about anger and boundaries. Maybe we were taught it's not okay to stand up for yourself. It's not okay to make a bit of a fuss when people are treating you poorly. It's not okay to take up that space and be big and powerful. So, what my question is to you guys that I want you to think about here for a minute is what were those beliefs that you were taught about boundaries? What was modeled to you by your parents? There was something that was modeled. Why can't you say no to certain people? Why do you feel guilty saying no? Where does that come from? This is my phrase that I always tell people. Babies are not born anxious and babies are not born depressed. It comes from somewhere. So where did you learn it was not okay to set boundaries? Where did you learn to feel guilty when you are saying no to someone? So as you're thinking about that, I want to do a quick lesson on guilt. We have two different types of guilt. We have true guilt and we have false guilt. True guilt is really healthy, in my opinion. Guilt and anger, surprisingly, are my two favorite emotions because guilt says I'm doing something illegal or I'm doing something immoral. My behavior is heading in this direction. I need to change course and change my behavior. If I yell at my husband, I should feel guilty. If I am rude to one of my staff, I should feel guilty. To me, that's my moral code. Again, everyone here is going to have a different moral code, and that's totally okay. I think that's what makes our world an interesting place, is that we do have different moral codes. I think there are some non-negotiable moral codes that we all should have, in my opinion, but we're all going to have different morals, and that's okay. So that's what true guilt is. I did something that is wrong. I need to apologize. I need to change my behavior. Then there's false guilt. False guilt is when we haven't done anything illegal, when we haven't done anything immoral. Like I said, I have two kids at home, and sometimes I want to go out with friends. Sometimes I actually even go away for a night to work on the business, to stay at a hotel, work for like 2 days straight, and come home. I feel a lot of guilt around that. Moms know what mom guilt is like. It's hard, but I run a business. I need to focus on that sometimes. And so I feel really guilty when I'm not around for my kids. But the question is, did I do anything illegal? Did I do anything immoral? No, I didn't. I took care of my business and got a bunch of stuff done, or I went out and had fun with my friends because now I'm going to be a better and attentive mom. I can focus better on my kids because I went out and had a great night with some friends, or I got a ton of work done. Now for the next month, I can be more hands-on with my kids and have more fun with them. But for some reason, and there's many places that guilt can come from, we feel guilty for for communicating our needs, for asking for what we need, for saying no, whatever it may be, taking up that space. And so ask yourself, where did this belief come from that I should feel guilty about asking for what I need? Why do I feel this false guilt? So when you feel that false guilt come up, you can ask yourself, did I do anything illegal? Did I do anything immoral? And that should be able to answer whether it's true guilt or whether it's false guilt. My question to you is, now that you know the difference between true and false guilt, why do you think the guilt will continue? What makes you continue to believe this false guilt? Just sit with that for a minute. Why do you believe the false guilt? What is it speaking to you? In all honesty, is that mom's voice or is that dad's voice? Where does this guilt come from? So I want you to ask yourself that question. Here's another question. Is it worth the risk to set a boundary to protect myself? I believe it's always worth a risk to stand up and protect yourself. It is a risk when we are learning to set boundaries to say no to someone. It's a risk at first because we don't know how people are going to respond. So, what's going to happen when we start setting boundaries is we have our boundary here. And people do not like when we set boundaries. I'm going to be completely honest with that because people are used to treating us a specific way. They're getting their needs met through us. That's not necessarily right. That's not fair, in my opinion. So, what happens is we set a boundary here and we say, actually, that's not okay for you to treat me that way. And people are like, but wait, I used to treat you this way all the time. Why can't I treat you this way? So, they're going to go around here and they're going to treat you slightly different because the boundary's set, but they're still going to try to get their needs met, is what's going to happen. And so it takes repetition again and again and practice and practice and practice setting boundaries with people. Unconsciously, people want their needs met. That is like foundational for all people. They want their needs met as much as possible. And so, as soon as you cut that pathway off to getting their needs met through you, they're going to try and go around a different way. They're going to try and go under the boundary, over the boundary, around the boundary, whatever it may be. And so you're going to have to continue to set that. Is that a bit of a risk? Yeah, it absolutely is. I don't want to downplay that. It's hard. Relationships change when we start setting boundaries. I hope they change for the better, but sometimes people don't want to respect our boundaries. But I always believe it's the risk, worth the risk. So I want you to ask yourself this. Is it worth it to continue to be treated this way? How much longer can I afford to have weak boundaries and be treated this way? My hope is that you say to yourself tonight, I can't do this any longer. It's not worth it any longer to have people treat me this way, to have people take advantage of my time, whatever that kind of boundary may be that's being violated. Because it's not worth it for us to be hurt at other people's, what's the word I'm looking for? Not expense, but their happiness, right? We get hurt when people don't respect our boundaries, and other people are happy, if that makes sense. So here's a way that you guys can start to set boundaries. The best type of boundaries, they're clear, they're kind, because I believe in kindness. And I quoted Dr. Jody Carrington last webinar, and I'm going to quote her again here because I just think she's incredible. Be kind and don't tolerate bullshit, in that order. I believe kindness is one of the most important things. But just because we are kind doesn't mean we tolerate people being rude to us. It doesn't mean we're okay with people taking advantage of us. But when we are kind, what happens is people's don't get their back up as much, right? When we're respectful, people are more likely to respect our boundaries as well. They need to be direct. So we have to be clear about what we are asking. I've learned that, especially as a business owner, you have to be very clear in your directions. You have to explain what you need and why you need it. So here's some examples. What it needs to start with is we always need to use I statements. The reason we use I statements is because if I were to sit here and talk to you and say, well, you did this wrong. I'm not happy that you did this. You make me angry. You always screw up. Your back is going to get up every single time I point the finger and say, you. That's going to hurt the other person. But when we come from a place of I, that's disarming. It brings people's walls down. So I feel overwhelmed when I have to work that weekend shift. So we're not saying to our boss, like, you screwed up again and booked me for a weekend shift when I told you I can't work. Well, that's not going to be helpful. So if we say, I feel overwhelmed when I have to work that weekend shift, I prefer not to work those. It's about me. I feel hurt when there is yelling and screaming in the house. I'm not okay with yelling and screaming in our house, whatever it may be. I'm not okay when I book time off of work to meet a friend for lunch and they don't show. That's really hurtful to me. Again, I'm talking about myself, I'm talking about my needs, and I'm talking about my emotions. I am not pointing the finger at someone. I am not putting blame and shame on them. I am being respectful and communicating my needs is what I'm doing. The other thing that you need to do is you need to hold your boundary consistently. Like I said, people are going to go around it. So I'm going to give you this analogy. We call it the broken record technique. And what it is like for people that were born in the 80s, maybe they remember what a broken record is. A broken record just continues to say the same phrase again and again and again and again. I'm not okay with yelling in our house. But you used to yell, and this is not fair, and blah, 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 blah. I just said, I'm not okay with yelling in our house. It scares me, and it scares our children. Well, who gives a crap about this and that? And I said, I am not okay with yelling in our house. What happens when we're having a discussion with someone, an argument, whatever we want to call it, we get pulled into the argument and we want to be defensive and we want to prove our point. Well, I don't like when you yell because it scares me. It scares our kids. I don't like when you talk down to me because you are just so rude. Well, that's not going to help the conversation move at all. Defensiveness is never going to help anything. But if we use I statements and we speak kindly, respectfully, and about ourselves, with the broken record technique, we are slowly, and again, it's going to take practice and practice, it's going to slowly teach people what is okay for us and what is not okay for us. We are the ones in charge of that. The other thing I want you to remember when you are setting a boundary, this is the hardest part of setting a boundary, is you need to let go of that guilt. As you are setting that boundary, and you're new to setting boundaries, you're going to start feeling guilty. It's not easy it's not easy setting boundaries. We start feeling guilty, we start feeling anxious, we start feeling scared, whatever it may be. I should not be doing this. I'm asking for my needs. My mom said that you should never ask for your needs, whatever it may be, right? We have these unconscious voices. It is not selfish to set a boundary. You are doing it to protect yourself, whether that's physically, mentally, emotionally, your time, all these different things. You are setting a boundary because you are important. Now, here's an example that a lot of clients that I used to work with really struggled with. So the example is here's where we put other people. They're like up really high. We put ourselves down here often. We're down in like the mud and the muck and just like all that grossness, and other people are ahead of ourselves. I don't believe it's about putting ourselves above people because then we're a little more self-absorbed, right? We're rude to people. But it's about an equal playing field, is what it is. And this is what I say to clients, and they struggle with this statement. And I want this to really sit in without feeling guilt or pushback for you guys. You are the most important person in your world. For me, I am the most important person in my world. If I am not okay, I can't be a good mom. I can't be a good wife. I can't be a good business owner and manager. I can't be a good friend. So I have to take care of myself. It's the example everyone gives, put on your own air mask and then you put on your child's air mask. Right on the airplane, they give that example all the time. But you are the most important person in your world. It is incredibly important to set a boundary to protect yourself. You need boundaries with your kids. You need boundaries with your partner. You need boundaries with your coworkers, with your boss, even though that's really hard to do sometimes. You need boundaries in all relationships because you are important and you need to take care of yourself. I hope that that can settle in for you. I know it is not an easy thing to realize for some people. Now, what happens is people start to push back, is what happens. And so the more we continue to set the boundary, the more people are going to get used to it. And what we need to do for ourselves is have a healthy internal dialogue. Setting a boundary is not selfish. Standing up for or is not rude, right? Saying no is not rude. When we protect ourselves, we give ourselves self-compassion. We take care of ourselves. We feel stronger, is what happens. And so I really am hoping that people tonight realize that they are the only ones that can take care of themselves. I'll be completely honest, a phrase I have used a lot of my marriage is like, I just want someone to take care of me. I'll say that to my husband. No one's coming to save me. No one, like my husband can't take care of me. My friends can't take care of me. No one is coming to save me but me. And so that's what I want you to realize tonight is no one is coming to help you. You are the one that is going. Can I get people to mute? I'm just hoping people can mute themselves if that's possible. No one is coming to save you. You can save yourself. You can set a boundary for yourself with other people that is going to protect you. You're the only one that can do that. People are going to maybe resist, but that's their issue. Oh, Latrice, can I just get you to mute your phone, please, Latrice? Thanks, Latrice. But that's people's problems. It's not our problem if people are going to resist. We are responsible for our own well-being. And it is up to other people to figure out how they feel. I am not responsible for how people feel. I'm responsible for being kind and respectful, but I am not responsible for how other people feel. If we set a respectful and kind boundary, and people are angry about that, people are sad about that, whatever it may be, that is on that person. We are not there to fix them. We are not there to help them. We are there to protect ourselves. Again, as long as we are respectful, we can take care of ourselves and empower ourselves and protect ourselves. So that's what I want to leave with you guys today is those big things around boundaries. Boundaries can be a life changer, is what they can be for you. I want to leave the last little bit of time here for people to ask questions. They can come on camera. I know people sometimes don't always want to show their face or their voice, so people can leave messages in the chat and things like that. But please, if there are any questions, let me know. There's one here. Is there such thing as self-boundaries? I would say there is. I think that's a really good thing. I'm going to give you an example from my life just because I know my life better than anyone else. I've been feeling pretty sick for the last year, diagnosed with a few things here and there, because I was not feeding myself well. I was not always eating the healthiest foods. I have a very busy life. I was not always exercising. And so I've had to change a lot of things in my life. And so I've had to set boundaries within myself. And I hope this is answering your question. The boundaries I've had to set within myself is I don't really drink alcohol anymore. I don't really have sugar anymore. We're going out for ice cream on Valentine's Day. My parents sent a gift card for Dairy Queen in the mail for the kids to get ice cream on Valentine's Day. And my body right now actually can't really handle much sugar. I feel quite sick after I have sugar, after I have alcohol. So that's a self boundary for myself. Another self boundary is I need to make sure I'm getting to the gym because that is really going to help me feel stronger. That's going to help my body heal. And so there are certain things within my life I have to keep a boundary with myself. I have to go to bed at a decent time. I can't stay up and scroll like I used to and just waste the night away. I have to keep myself accountable. And so that's an example of a self boundary. I hope that answers your question. Yeah, good question. Is professional boundaries similar to relationship boundaries, or does it differ? I think they can be one and the same, and I think they can be a bit different. What happens, like they're one and the same because they're person to person, is what they are, right? You have certain boundaries with this coworker, and you have a different type of boundary with this coworker, or whatever it may be. But when it comes to working with a boss or something like that, there can be really toxic work environments. And I know that I've worked in some myself. It can be really difficult. And sometimes all you can do is try and set a boundary. And sometimes bosses don't respect that. If you work in a union, that's great. You can talk to your union rep. I've done that in the past when I've been disrespected. Sometimes that goes somewhere, and sometimes it really doesn't go anywhere. But the most important thing, I think, in a professional relationship, and I hope this is answering your question, is if there's like a toxic relationship, is we try to keep our distance as much as possible from that individual if we can. We also try to say no when there are toxic requests made of us. Unfortunately, in some workplaces, we can't get around those toxic work requests or those toxic relationships. And so then it comes down to the question of, is this job worth it to me? Do I need to start looking for another job? And I know the job market is incredibly tough. I know that. But is it worth it for me to continue to stay in this unhealthy environment that's making me anxious, that's making me lie awake at night, making me, miss the kids' concerts at school because I can't ever get time off work or whatever it may be. And so you have to ask yourself, is it worth it for me to stay in this toxic work relationship? I believe boundaries can be asserted with everyone. Not everyone's going to respect your boundary, unfortunately. And you may have a boss or a coworker who will choose not to respect your boundary. And if that is the case, I am incredibly sorry that that's happening. That happens in corporate culture. That happens in like working at McDonald's. It happens in all areas of the workforce. And so we try and set boundaries. Actually, I missed talking about this, so let me add this in. What we do with boundaries is we set our boundary, we set our boundary, we set our boundary. Again, the broken record, we're just going to set that boundary. And if our boundary continues to be disrespected, it is appropriate for us to remove ourselves from that situation. Anger has two action tendencies. One is to set a boundary, it calls us to action. Two is to remove ourselves from that situation if our boundary continues to be disrespected. So I hope that answers your question. Any other questions? I'm glad that answered your question. Any other questions or questions about the agency or anything like that that I can answer for people? Okay, I hope this was really helpful for you. Again, I want you to go back to the very beginning of the webinar. Why did you come here tonight? Why did you want to learn about boundaries? So what did you learn and what are you going to take from here? How can you learn to protect yourself better? How can you stand up for yourself and take up that space without feeling guilty? So, as we're kind of signing off here, what is that one action step? I want you to tell yourself right now, what is that one action step that you are going to do to protect yourself? So, with that, we are going to close. Next week, I'm super excited for the webinar next week. It is a pharmacist in the area who is going to join us and answer any questions about medication. I don't know much about medication. Like I do, but ethically, I'm not supposed to answer a ton of questions about medication. And so we have a pharmacist who can talk all day about medication, side effects, questions, all that kind of stuff. Yes, I can absolutely. If you can send an email to, so we're Calgary Institute of Counseling, you go on our webpage. And if you go on our webpage, you can see the email address or you can fill out a form. And if somebody wants the recording, absolutely email in or fill out a form on the website. And then what we can do is we can get that recording to you. Absolutely, we can. But yeah, if you really enjoyed this, tell people to come next week. We're going to have a pharmacist. The week after, I think, is anxiety. So, some really cool things about that. So, I hope you guys have a good evening and I hope that you take some action away from this tonight. Thank you so much.